Hello, my name is Creostix, and after beating the evil within and all the DLC, I wanted to take a look at the model viewer, because it has some pretty interesting lore in it, in the monster and character sections especially. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to read these out one by one, and then I will comment on them if I have something to say after each one. Okay? First up, Sebastian Castellanos. A fine detective, but often curt with people. Often acts before thinking things through, making trouble for others. Joseph is the only partner he's had for a significant duration. Which, sure, makes sense. And then, Sebastian Castellanos' trench coat. Sebastian's favorite coat, given to him by his wife. He wears it all year long and never seems to get it cleaned. Which tells us a bit of something about the character of Sebastian, you know? Julie Kidman. Kidman has little recollection of or interest in her past. Her only concern is what she has to do now and what will happen if she fails. I would actually love to know too what exactly happens if she fails, but nothing good, I'm sure. Julie Kidman wounded. When encountered again in Ruvik's mental world, Kidman is badly wounded and very shaken up. Only she knows what happened to her while she was on her own. And thanks to the DLC, we know that too, and it was bad. Joseph Oda. Joseph is a competent and by the books. A reliable detective, he is considerate of others, but hard on himself. Once he's made up his mind, he sees things through to the end. His persistence often gets him into trouble, but he doesn't waver. Unless he's corrupted by Ruvik, but you know, little details. Nurse Tatiana. Tatiana is a nurse in the locked ward at Beacon Mental Hospital. Seeing so many things that no one should ever have to see has left her emotionally dead and eventually taken an even greater toll. Which I'm sure involves either STEM or Mobius or both. Leslie Withers. Leslie has always compensated for his difficulty communicating by unconsciously emulating the thoughts of others. This characteristic is what Ruvik sought for his experiments in linking consciousness. Makes sense, sure, yeah. Sounds pretty legit. Marcelo Jimenez. Marcelo is a doctor who performed clandestine experiments on the patients of Beacon Mental Hospital. Working in collusion with a foreign organization, the organization had him instated as head of the hospital, but he ultimately disappeared under mysterious circumstances, of which we now know more, again thanks to the DLC. He activated the stem and went in with it. Laura Victoriano. Ruvik's beautiful, generous sister, the only one who understood him. In life, she preferred to wear red. Ooh, the hair really moves in kinda disturbing ways there. Even the normal look of her just gives the chills, you know? Ruvik, Ruben Victoriano. Cut off from the outside world, Ruvik continued his research alone until one day a fire broke out in his basement laboratory. His body was never found among the smoldering remains of his once proud mansion. Ooh. Ruvik without robe. Vicious burns have left his skin senseless and useless for regulating his body temperature. Ravaged by ceaseless headaches and physical and mental seizures, he was known for being close to the physical limits of his body. Ooh, that, yeah, doesn't look too pleasant, to be honest, sure. Ruben Victoriano, child. Child-aged Ruvik when he still retained a shred of innocence. At this age, he began showing glimpses of his morbid interests, doing things like dissecting small animals. To be fair, in most schools it's done anyways, but yeah, it sounded pretty bad when the flashbacks came. Ruben Victoriano, child, scarred. Ruvik lost his sister in a fire that is believed to have been set by local villagers. He underwent lengthy and painful rehabilitation, during which he met Dr. Jimenez, the man who would change his life, and the man who would then be sort of responsible for all the bad things in the world. Young adult Ruben. Coming of age, young Ruvik rejected further skin regeneration treatments, instead retreating into his basement laboratory. We haven't really seen a bunch of him instead of like in a couple of flashbacks. Still pretty menacing though. Alter ego. The result of connecting a subject with dissociative identity disorder to the STEM device. The dominant and alternate personalities blend into a single two-headed creature. And here is especially where the model viewer gets interesting. It gives these glimpses of facts and lore on why the monsters look the way they are. And that is super cool. And it makes sense here. So it has the identity disorder, and that causes it to have indeed the look of two monsters. Sadist. A creature born from the mind of a murderer merged with Ruvik's madness. He has lost himself to rage, becoming murderousness personified. Yeah, you're gonna get bad things when you put murderers into STEM with that. Yeah, that makes just about as sense as anything else here. Oof. Luckily we had flashbolts though. Zen. Twin orphan, abandoned and raised in a laboratory beneath the cemetery. The more cowardly of the two, Zen lashes out violently at those he doesn't know and is usually kept chained up. Interesting thought though, is he indeed also a test subject who has then grown to this size because of STEM and Ruvik, or was he already super large when he entered this nightmare world? We don't know, we can only guess. Neyun. Twin orphan, abandoned and raised in a laboratory beneath the cemetery. Neyun is never at ease and gets worked up so easily that he is made to wear a mask that covers his eyes and ears. Which, sure, sounds great. Kind of an on-topic random fact that I looked up earlier is that it is very clearly implied that Neyun and Zen are twins that are conjoined from the head, from the side of the head. So they've been separated at some time, meaning that perhaps they were indeed test subjects who had originally been conjoined twins from the cranial area. The Keeper. A creature created from a blend of Ruvik's final memories before he was dismembered and his fury at having his research stolen from his safe. Anyone who approaches the safe is killed and the severed head added to those in the sack. Ooh. Yeah, those sure are, man. Not fun to fight. At all. Trauma. A creature born from Ruvik's concept of death and rebirth, based upon his rejection of the religion his father forced upon him from an early age. And that's an interesting point. I was always wondering, what did this creature really denote? It looked vaguely religious to me, yeah. But I couldn't quite get the idea of why it looks the way it does. And that explains a lot, quite nicely. Sentinel. Guardian of the church, bred in a cult laboratory beneath the cemetery. It was raised on sacrificial victims and craves human flesh. And again, here's the interesting part. I kinda doubt that the dog, if it indeed existed also in the real world, I don't think it looked quite like this. And also an interesting point is, was the dog experimented on or bred in the lab in the real world or only in the nightmare world? Either option is perfectly possible, you see, because as we will learn later on, animals and such are most likely in the nightmare world memories of the human test subjects that have been, put into STEM. Therefore, this dog could either represent a memory of a guard dog at the church, this is only my speculation though, or it could indeed signify that there was some sort of dog shenanigans going on in the church in the real world, and this is the twisted, nightmarish memory of that dog, adding another mouth and barbed wire and spikes and all that. So every option is possible, but that is pretty much what I feel like makes the most sense. Okay? And next up, Laura, creature. A creature born from the memories of Laura's tragic death and Ruvik's own vengefulness. The thing is nearly immune to bullets, but reacts violently to open flame. Nearly immune is right. She can take a beating and won't even flinch most times. Man. And that hair, this creature is pretty much like this and the Keeper are the two ones that really stick to your mind after the game, man. Ugh. Quell. A creature generated by Ruvik's desire to remain unseen by others. It changes color to blend in with its surroundings and uses its long tentacles to ensnare the unwary and slay them. And again, this is an interesting little factoid. I was wondering, how does the weird invisible tentacle monster fit into the lore of how everything else seems to have a purpose as a monster? It signifies something either about Ruvik, or about the other test subjects, or about the world in which it is in. And this is important to know and understand. Desire to remain unseen. That is cool to know. That is really cool. Shigio. An aquatic monster born when a subject drowned during testing and their consciousness became lost within Ruvik's mental world. It dwells in the murky depths and attempts to pull under anyone who draws near. And these are indeed the water monsters we encountered in the city area. We saw only pretty much the head most of the time. But yeah, that is a cool thing. The picture is a bit, let's say, kind of amusing in a way, like they're fishing Shigios in the Nightmare, but the height, 6.2 meters, and the feet of, I believe, 20 feet and 4 inches, weighs 1.4 tons. It didn't look that huge, but that is fucking huge, and that is one of the cooler monster designs and monster lore facts in the game, in my opinion. I love that. Man. Amalgam Alpha. The final consciousness of test subjects who died while connected to the stem, combined into one single horrific shape. It attacks anything that moves, attempting to flee from certain death. So yeah, you try to flee from it and it kills you, much like, well, almost happened to Sebastian and pretty much happened to Jimenez. Although I guess Jimenez only just stood there in awe and fear and some sort of weird-ass state, but anyway. An important note here is that it says it is a final consciousness of the multiple test subjects, So, if you remember the Executioner DLC, in the tub there was only one test subject who signified the Amalgam Alpha. So it's probably important to separate that from this by the fact that the Executioner Amalgam is slightly different in physical design as well. It has some of the parts of the monster are flipped compared to this. And I like to think that the Executioner DLC monsters are more like representations of new test subjects who have been taken the form of the monsters that come from the main game. So they're not technically supposed to be their actual monster origins as test subjects, only that the new test subjects are representations, like have representations which then became these things, the Amalgam Alpha, the Sadist, and such and so. With maybe the exception of Joseph, but even that is kinda up in the air. It was weird. Heresy. A monster with massive insect-like legs. The creature is a test subject who completely lost his identity while connected to the stem and went on a rampage, devouring the consciousness of anyone he found. Which kinda... I was almost expecting something mentioning maybe gluttony or such and such, because it really looks like it could fit. But yeah, it's like a lost creature of just rage and rampaging and devouring stuff. So that's why it looks the way it does. Man. And it is huge. It is fucking huge. Amalgam. A creature that combines the anger and animosity of the victims of Ruvik's research and his own madness. It grows larger as it absorbs the fear and hatred around him. So interestingly enough, the final boss of the game is not only the personification of Ruvik, but also the sort of reincarnation of all of the anger and animosity of his victims, which makes him kind of an interesting thing, really. More interesting than I thought it would be. And again, 21 meters, 68 feet 11 inches. That is a big finish, man. Big finish. Amalgam core. Buried deep within the creature's own body, Ruvik is only vulnerable when it opens its head, exposing the core, which is then the second phase of the final boss, and Ruvik is at the very mouth, which is very Resident Evil 4-like, or Resident Evil-like in general, really. So there we have that, and we don't have the measurements, but it sure looks almost as big as the other one. Haunted. Group A. Human test subjects connected to the stem and turned into creatures by synchronizing with Ruvik's consciousness. So this is the basic explanation of where the zombies come from and why do they look like the way they do, in a way, and what they're indeed called, haunted. And we have more of them. Haunted Group B. Somehow, even people who couldn't be connected to the stem appear as monsters. The explanation to this isn't indeed given here, but I believe there would be only two possible ideas that make sense here. Either these other monsters, these other haunted, are memories of other haunted, you know? So test subject A gets into the stem and becomes a haunted, but also he has memories which might create some of these other haunted. The other possibility is that, as we learned, the stem is remote controlled, or people can be introduced and injected into the stem or forced into it remotely without actually being connected by their neck. So the other option is that these are victims of that sort of event. Haunted Group C. Subjects retain a glimmer of their original consciousness, appearing as they did in life. However, having died in the real world, they have lost their true humanity. Which indeed explains, for example, the cousin or brother of Jimenez and the ambulance driver police officer whose name always escapes me. I almost remember it, but then I never really do. I am kind of curious though, what about the lobster faces? Did they have some sort of, I don't know, crippling skin disease that they had, and then it got turned into that? Which, this is again speculation on my part, but let's suppose for a second that the lobster face characters or the haunted are test subjects who either have some sort of disease in their face or feel they are exceptionally ugly. That would then coincide with their invisibleness, because then they would have the desire to be hidden, to not be seen, much like with the tentacle monster who represents Rubik's desire to not be seen. It could be, but it is only my speculation though. Haunted Group D. Haunted attack normal humans on sight and attempt to devour their brains, perhaps in an effort to recover their lost memories. And this is an interesting tiny little factoid which I didn't know I needed a fact to explain why they're aggressive, but now I have one and it makes sense, and it makes the world a tiny bit more rich and interesting to me. That's cool. Haunted Group E. Though they are simple-minded, some of them use weapons and tools, and some individuals appear to be driven by someone's commands. Which would make kind of sense, as, for example, Rubik probably has some kind of direct influence on at least some of the haunted, if not all of them. And the basic simple-mindedness of using tools kind of sort of makes them different than typical zombies, although they still act in very similar ways to normal zombies in Resident Evil games, and so on. Group F. Some haunted, having a higher level of synchronization with Rubik, wear strange masks or hoods. I believe those would then count the protective mask as well, but yeah, the Rubik zombies then would be possibly the result of not only being more synchronized, but perhaps victims of him trying to find subjects that fit his own brainwave patterns, which he then indeed later on found in Leslie. Animals. Birds, livestock, and other living creatures not turned into monsters are almost certainly the remnants of memories of subjects connected to the stem. And that is an interesting point. If one has ever wondered, why are there crows and bunnies and cows and pigs and such, there's the reason. They are memories of the human test subjects in the stem. And then we enter the weapons. Probably not quite as interesting, but still, it's interesting to me to read them out and see if there's anything here. A survival knife found stuck into a dead body in the room beneath the hospital. Apart from a sneak kill, taking on monsters with this is suicide. Actually, it never allows me to use it as a melee weapon, which is, come to think of it, pretty interesting. Castellanos will punch a zombie, but not use the knife which he clearly has. That's an interesting thought, but, well, that's what we had to work with. Grenade. A valuable weapon when in a tight spot, facing a group of enemies. Lack of care can kill you just as easily as any monster. Oh, believe me, I know. Yes. Handgun. Revolver. Revolver carried by Officer Connolly. It doesn't appear to have been used very often. Perhaps there wasn't much opportunity. Shotgun. A shotgun designed over 100 years ago. It still performs today, but when discharged, the slide thrusts out the back of the receiver, often injuring operators who are not used to it. Interesting. Sniper rifle. This rifle has an unusual design and appears to be handmade. The scope's mount, hollow stock, and handling are rough, and the balance is bad. Oh, I know the balance is bad. I've had some pretty harrowing moments with this one. Handgun, automatic. The automatic handgun preferred by Joseph, originally designed for the military, it is sturdy and reliable. It has an excellent rate of fire and reload speed. It also looks pretty similar to the one Kidman is using, sometimes, but not sure if the exact same one though. Magnum. A large revolver that fires high-caliber Magnum rounds. The weapon itself, as well as its ammunition, are custom-made. It makes a powerful trump card, which I never used in the main game because I felt they were too valuable to waste. Oh well. Agony crossbow. A powerful, specially crafted crossbow. The way that it uses trapped warheads means that it was probably created by Ruvik. And that's an interesting tiny factoid. It says probably created by Ruvik, so it's not an absolute fact, but it would make sense, because otherwise, why the hell would it be here? Maybe it was something he used to have fun with in the early stages of him being in the STEM, before becoming the more of a evil god, which he became later on. It could be, and it would make sense, but again, that part is only my speculation. Burst handgun. Pulling the trigger of this special handgun fires 3-shot bursts. This damage-centric weapon is good at suppressing enemies, but is not well suited for conditions where ammunition is scarce. I never saw that one. It's probably either a reward for collectibles or new game pluses or maybe difficulties or something like that. Double-barreled shotgun. Side-by-side double-barrel shotgun. It is a dependable weapon with a high rate of fire and is a perennial favorite among hunters. A good gun, but it fires the 2 shots a bit too easily, and that results in losing bullets. High penetration sniper rifle. A sniper rifle with improvements made to the barrel and action. It has a carbon stock and a collapsible bipod. This high-end rifle is used by military and police sniper teams. Again, since I never saw this one, it's probably a collectible reward or a reward from difficulties or such. Machine gun. A light machine gun, presumably military issue. It uses rifle ammunition, so it doesn't pack a strong punch, but it doesn't kick as much and is stable when firing. I believe I saw this one as a reward for beating the game, I think. Rocket launcher. This military rocket launcher is incredibly destructive. Exhaust is directed out the rear to reduce recoil. Usage has been simplified to the point that anyone can operate it. Which we know, we did operate it in the end, and also at least one of the sadist kind of zombies used it as well, so it's real simple. Brass knuckles. Worn around the knuckles, this weapon increases the strength of physical attacks. I would have loved to have one of these in the main game, because the punching was weak, really. And there we have the main game, and now we will go to the assignment DLC model viewer. And here we are. First up, we have the ambulance driving cop, Oscar Connolly, the name I couldn't remember. A uniformed patrol officer with the KCPD, Oscar is a good guy, but a lackluster cop with no real ambition. He's spent his entire career as a patrol officer without any significant achievements to his credit. Black cat. This black cat doesn't stray far from its beloved leather couch. Though she's never met the cat, playing with it offers Kidman a moment of respite and makes her feel somewhat nostalgic. And it soothes the mind when it is on a bloody stain of stars, of the star logo of Mobius. Yes, I'm sure. Haunted Mobius. The appearance of these haunted has been influenced by Kidman's own past. A surge of energy from within causes them to glow when in her presence. And this is an important note. So the Mobius-like haunted are not actually Mobius employees who have been placed into the STEM as test subjects, but they have been influenced by Kidman's past. And that's why they look like this. They are just either normal test subjects who have been influenced by by the memories of Kidman, or they are completely constructed by memories. And this explains the other haunted too, who look like people who, quote-unquote, could not be connected to STEM, and here is the answer why. They are what they are. Cadaver. A creature born from the bloated core of a dead haunted, the cadaver is blind and relies on sound to zero in on its prey. So we still don't know the exact origin of why it looks like the way it does, but then again, a diseased exploding thing is pretty much all the info we need when we see this, and we should then run away, yes. Joseph Haunted. Joseph, dominated by Ruvik's will within STEM and somehow aware of Kidman's past, seeks revenge upon her for dragging him into her nightmare. But is it really him? That is the million-dollar question. My answer would be either no or partly no. Because 1. You can never trust anything truly that you see in the nightmare world of STEM. So anything could be a lie, every single thing. That needs to be remembered. You cannot know what's real, what's not, and what's true and what's false. It's kind of frustrating to have it like that, but it is the thing we are now operating in. And that's why some of the canon and some of the lore can be a bit confusing and sometimes even a tiny bit feel contradictory, like in the Executioner DLC, the one test subject being the multiples of Amalgam Alpha, for example. And also because I don't think actual Joseph knows Kidman's past. Nothing has been hinted at that, so that knowledge at least comes from Ruvik and not from Joseph. So it's either a haunted-ish Joseph who has been given information by Ruvik's influence, or it is a construct of Ruvik's influence altogether. And next up, we will go to the model viewer of the Consequence DLC. And here we are. And this will be the final list of models because the Executioner DLC does not have a model viewer. So there's the final part. Shade. Shade is tall, flexible, and suggestive. Another of Ruvik's pawns, she is a physical manifestation of his search for a new body. Like Kidman, she reaches for Leslie, and her light has the ability to reveal memories and locations buried within the minds of people connected to STEM. So there we have the answer of why does the Shade look like, well, maybe not completely look like, why is it suggestive, but we know what it represents. And that is an important thing to know because I was confused, what is it trying to say? And it is indeed a manifestation of a search for body, and especially Leslie. Sebastian Young. A youthful version of Sebastian, once an energetic and confident detective, Sebastian has become a shell of his former self after losing his daughter Lily and the disappearance of his wife Myra. He has picked up an awful smoking habit since joining the KCPD. Sebastian and Joseph, young. Partners for many years, Joseph has always been there to tone down Sebastian's bad cop attitude. Joseph was there to support Sebastian through his personal tragedy, and since then they've always taken on cases as a pair. Well, now we know, I suppose. Sebastian haunted. Sebastian under Ruvik's control. Despite his efforts, even Sebastian succumbed to Ruvik's influence inside STEM. Luckily, and with precise aiming, Kidman was able to save him from Ruvik's grasp. And as we indeed know, Kidman shot Ruvik, or an apparition of Ruvik, instead of Sebastian, but the misunderstanding was already happened at that point, so can't be helped then, I guess. And finally, the Administrator. A warped image of Kidman's superior. Despite Kidman's conviction that he is only an apparition, he repeatedly insists he is real. But how could he truly know Kidman's deepest thoughts and fears? Can anything one hears or sees inside STEM really be trusted? The answer would be no, you can't. And that really hints at that point really hard. My thinking is that the Administrator, the G-Man boss, is indeed only Ruvik's creation, especially because of the shadows, which look very much like the Laura creature claws in the game. And that also is an important point to remember when trying to understand what happens in the story and what does the ending signify and what is like the actual true end of the game. It is extremely open because both the main game ending and the DLC ending of the main story with Kidman and Joseph and Sebastian and all those, they all have hints that they are either not happening in the real world or someone activated the STEM during those endings. Meaning, for example, that while we don't hear the high-pitched noise in the end of the Consequence DLC, Kidman doesn't really get affected by them, so she might not actually even hear it, perhaps. Or, well, I think she would, but at least she wouldn't react to it. Who knows? Who knows? And in the main game ending, Sebastian hears the high-pitched noise, which then would suggest that either the world isn't real, or someone activated the STEM, or a third possible option is maybe Ruvik has gained some sort of weird control of the world in the real world, creating weird things like the high-pitched noise. All of those are perfectly possible, or perhaps Sebastian just actually got out and had some sort of high-pitched noise seizure. Who knows? The thing is, there is no correct, true idea of what really happened. We can discern some theories and ideas of it from the game, but the main point is you cannot trust anything that you see or hear as absolutely real inside STEM, and we can never be completely sure if we are truly outside the STEM. So it's kind of frustrating, but the point always is you cannot know what's real. Therefore, your interpretation of the ending is perfectly fine. It's supposed to be up for interpretation for everyone who plays it, I feel like. For me, if you want my take on what happened, I feel like what happened was that Sebastian was outside in the real world, then someone activated the STEM when he was outside the doors, and then he was no longer in it when the credits hit. And then the end of the Consequence DLC, Kidman never actually woke up in that because she had the weird scar on her hand. That's the biggest clue that it can't be the real world. And therefore, that those events of her waking Sebastian up didn't happen then. They happened again later in the main game. That's the only way it makes kind of sense to me. So that's what I think. And then, of course, Ruvik is in the Leslie body, and Leslie is apparently gone somewhere with Ruvik inside his body. I do hope there will be a sequel. I still don't know if there will be, but I do hope so. But if you have any other theories, please do comment about them below, and I'm listening because this is an interesting game to think about. And the main takeaway from this that I really like is that all of the monsters, with a couple of exceptions, have explained ideas of why they look like the way they do or where they come from. And that really makes a horror game for me much more interesting, that the monsters seem like they have a point to being there. But with that long little speech done, I am quite out of time here, and I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please do drop a like or a comment or even subscribe or share if you want to. It would really help, and I hope this gave you some new info or new ideas about the game or about the monsters or characters in it. And I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.